I've been trying to reach you regarding your car's extended warranty.
My what?
Your car's extended warranty, Dan. You need to get the car's extended warranty.
No.
Hey, Jordan. I was just trying to call you about your car's extended warranty. Here's some coffee.
Thank you.
Dan, this is our last attempt to reach you.
What? Well, first of all, happy Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to everyone out there who has had the joy of raising children and those of you who will get to meet your kids someday in heaven. I hope all of you feel especially loved and cared for today. It's just the tiniest of ways that we can repay you for everything that you all do for us on a regular basis. It's actually been a great joy of mine watching Janie in that role with Asa. It's funny. I mean, like, we ask for a lot of advice, obviously, and we consult Google an awful lot, but really, this is just kind of an instinctive thing for her. When it comes down to it, Janie really already knows what it is Asa needs because she's his mom. And that title comes with a purpose and a whole list of things that she just does, that she just knows to do. Nobody has to tell her to do them. And we're still working our way through the Gospel of Mark this morning, and I really like the point that we are at today. It kind of worked out nicely for me because I would way rather talk today than next week, but one of the things that I think really gets lost in translation, like literally in the translation from Greek to English, is just how well written the Gospel of Mark is. I think we're going to see a lot of his literary mastery at work as we go through chapter 6 this morning. I find it incredibly interesting how he stitched all of these things together really to drive at a single point in this section of his book. He really is making one single point and has been since the beginning of his book. Chapter 1, he starts out, this is who Jesus is, the beginning of the gospel about Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of God. Just let me tell you who Jesus is. Chapter 2, Jesus starts to clarify the things that he cares about, like eating with sinners and things like that. Chapter 3, he's establishing the differences between his kingdom and the kingdom of Satan. Even though the Jews thought they were in the kingdom of heaven, it really wasn't. In chapter 4, Jesus explains who he is through parables. Chapter 5, he backs up his words about himself with proof through miracles. And this trend will continue throughout Mark. He never really gets far away from telling us who Jesus is. But in chapter 6, I think he goes to much greater length, even in the ordering and telling of these stories, how he fits them together to just make sure that we are still paying attention. Because in chapter 6, he holds in contrast people who don't understand Jesus' identity and people who do. And we get to see the difference between the two of them. So let me just model Mark this morning as we go through these few different stories while I make just one simple point. If you know who Jesus is, everything else just falls into place. And throughout all of chapter 6, we see great examples of what happens when we don't understand who Jesus is. Now, our entire Christian life is predicated upon the understanding of the identity of Jesus Christ, because his identity directly impacts our identity. And our identity directly impacts our purpose in life. Stuart Briscoe is quoted as saying, "The more you tell someone who they are, the less you have to tell them what to do." If you know who you are, the question of what should I do just falls into place. Just like Janie with Asa, the problem is we don't always know who we are. Maybe because we don't have a clear view of who Jesus is. Studying the Gospel of Mark for most of us should bring us face to face with the uncomfortable reality that most of the time we fit in more closely with the religious leaders of that day and all of the people who misunderstood Jesus the most, more than we align with Jesus himself. I think we're going to see that a lot this morning. You understand who you are as a Christian based on who Jesus is. And if you don't have a clear understanding of who Jesus is, your mission and purpose are going to be directly impacted. The more you understand who you are, the less you have to be told what to do. But let's get into this a little bit. Now, there's nearly 60 verses in here, so I'm going to have to summarize portions a little bit, but there's just a lot that I want to unpack here because I would just love it if I can make this come alive even just a little bit for all of us here this morning. So jumping right in, verse 1. Jesus left there and went to his hometown, accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. "Where did this man get these things?" they asked. "What's this wisdom that has been given him? What are these remarkable miracles he is performing?" This is not a normal teaching moment for Jesus. This is an incredibly emotionally charged moment. If you actually remember from the last time I preached a few weeks ago, we talked about Jesus disowning his family. Now, that was only a couple of days ago in this story, like less than a week prior. So Jesus' family comes up to Jesus and they try to say, "Hey, Jesus, stop doing what you're doing. You're embarrassing us. You're putting us in danger." And then he disowns his family. He says, "Who are my mother and my brothers?" Then just a couple of days later, here he is in his hometown with his mother and his brothers. This synagogue that he'd be teaching in, this was Jesus' home church. Okay, he was most likely dedicated in this place. Joseph, his father, has already died at this point. It's very likely where he is standing teaching right now is the same place that Joseph had his funeral. So with all of these undertones, we have to realize that this is a very emotionally charged moment for Jesus, and unfortunately, it doesn't go quite like I'm sure he wished it may have. In verse 3, "Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. One of the reasons it's safe to assume that Joseph is gone in this moment is because they ask, "Isn't this the carpenter?" Had Joseph been alive, it would have been more normal for them to ask, "Isn't this the carpenter's son?" And this is implying that at some point Joseph died and Jesus took over his business and used it to provide for his family. And this also means that at some point he abandoned that business built by his father and left his brothers with the job of taking care of Mary. And they also call him Mary's son, not Joseph's son. Now, even if Joseph was dead, it would still be normal to call him the son of Joseph, not Mary. But remember, this is Jesus' hometown. This is Nazareth. And they know the story of how Jesus was born. And I do think this was intended as a slight at Jesus. Because you know that nobody around believed Mary's virgin birth story. They were saying, "Hey, isn't this just the carpenter who abandoned his family? Isn't this just that illegitimate child whose mom tried to cover up with some really weak story?" Man, don't we do that all the time in the church? We don't let people grow beyond who they were. We completely disregard who God is making them to be. We get so caught up in people's past that we completely ignore the testimony of their life right now, or we write them off as a lost cause. They're never going to be able to change. And sometimes the people who we do that to the worst is ourselves. And we get so tripped up by who we were, the mistakes that we've made, we've become convinced that we can never change or will never be able to amount to anything or never have a significant impact on the world around us because of this thing or this person that I used to be. We have all done things or have had things done to us that we wish we could change. And we let that speak to who we are. But Jesus grew beyond his childhood. Jesus, the Son of God, even grew up and changed. But the way the church handles people's past betrays that we don't know who Jesus is. And the way that I beat myself up over who I am or who I was, rather than focusing on who Jesus is making me become, betrays that I don't know who Jesus is. So I'm not going to read the next couple of verses, but basically Jesus decides to no longer do any miracles there. They ask him for more proof, and Jesus is like, "Look, I already did that. I'm not your genie. Just take it or leave it," and he leaves. Sometimes people just won't be able to accept that you've ever changed. And unfortunately, more often than not, it's church people that have the hardest time with that. I can't imagine how painful this moment was for Jesus, but I would assume that it's second only to his time on the cross. If you skip down to verse 9, it says, "Calling the 12 to him, he began to send them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over impure spirits. These were his instructions: take nothing for the journey except a staff, no bread, no bag, no money in your belts, wear sandals, but not an extra shirt." Jesus is giving his disciples authority over demons. Okay, this is cool because actually Jesus wasn't the first person ever to get good at driving out demons. That wasn't like an original thing that he was doing. There were lots of people that did that, whether legitimately or through some form of staging and acting, but other people showed that same power that he has. All right, now Jesus is claiming a whole extra level of authority when he can, just by saying it, give that level of power and authority over to other people. All right, nobody has ever done that before. It's one thing for him to do these things for himself, like, okay, cool, neat party trick, Jesus, but it's even more proof of who he is, that he's able to extend this ability onto other people who will perform the same acts even without him being there with them. But the next little part is odd. Why would Jesus tell them to not bring anything on the journey? All right, remember, we are in the middle of a discussion on who Jesus is. And I believe that Jesus is telling them, since I am the one that is sending you, since I am the one that is giving you the authority to go, you can rely on me to provide for you. Jesus tells them to go and just rely entirely on God. Since I have told you to go, you know you can do this because you go with my authority. If you're following God's call on your life, God will provide for you to do the thing he has told you to do. And this isn't permission to be reckless and stupid, but the way we stress over keeping a happy, comfortable livelihood betrays that we don't know who Jesus is. If you're following God's calling, he will provide you to do that calling. You may or may not be rich and comfortable, but you will be fulfilled. And that's what life to the fullest means. You will be satisfied with your life because it's full of purpose, you living out what you were created to be. And this is going to come up again in just a minute, but verse 11, "And if any place will not welcome you or listen to you, leave that place and shake the dust off your feet as a testimony against them." There was a teaching in Jewish culture that anytime you passed by a sinner or through unclean cities, once you got past the bad people, you would clean off your shoes so as to not bring like the bad dirt that they walked on with you. And you would do this in full sight of whoever to make sure that they knew that you were better than they are. All right, that was how it would play out anyway. Maybe not the original intent of that teaching, but that's how it was used. And Jesus is undermining this teaching. No, why don't you just bang your shoes off at these people? Because they are really the ones that are unclean. They claim to know me. They act like they are a part of my kingdom, but they don't know who I am. Actually, the very people that they are shaking their shoes at are the people that I am going to invite into my kingdom. Jesus doesn't judge based on people's religious behaviors or how well they fit or follow the Jewish rituals. He judges based on if they accept him or not. That's it. But the way the church judges people based on their behavior or lack of good churchiness, like they aren't enough like us, betrays that we don't know who Jesus is. And then we actually interrupt this story of the disciples going out and preaching for Jesus. We just hit pause on that story and then take a look at Herod beheading John the Baptist. But that's weird because that already happened way back in chapter 1. This is actually a flashback where we go in and we get all the details that we weren't given in chapter 1 when this event actually occurred. So why stop the momentum of the story here? Because we're in the identity section of Mark, and Mark wants to, again, make a point. This time not with the story, but with the literary element of a flashback, to get us to ask the question, why now, why here? And the name of Jesus had become so popular, it is getting back to Herod. People are starting to make suggestions as to who Jesus is. Maybe he's a prophet, maybe he's John the Baptist reincarnated, and this drives Herod mad, and he starts reliving the moment that he had John the Baptist killed. Because King Herod is getting a little uncomfortable with one of the titles in particular being thrown around Jesus that might threaten his throne. That's king, but we need to keep moving. When we get back to the actual timeline here in verse 30, the apostles come back. It says, the apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Okay, I bet this was an awesome moment for them. Jesus, you won't believe all the cool stuff we did. We relied on your power, your provision, and we told so many people, and so many people believed, and it's looking like they're really starting to figure this stuff out. But no, the disciples are dumb, which is actually good news for you and me because we're dumb too, but they're about to go and screw everything up again. So a bunch of people notice them gathered, and they try to escape in the desert. Jesus and the disciples try to escape into the desert, but everyone follows them. So, verse 34, it says, when Jesus landed and saw this huge crowd, he got super ticked off at them because they kept following him everywhere they went. Yeah, not really. It says he had compassion on them. All right, he didn't go, man, why are all these freeloaders coming from? Can't they just go and get a daggum job? These needy people, they're kind of weighing me down. No, it says he had compassion on them. Verse 35, by this time it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him and said, this is a remote place, a desert. They said, and it's already very late. Send the people away so they can go into the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. But he answered, you give them something to eat. And they said to him, that would take more than a half a year's wages. Are we to go spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat? Oh, silly Jesus. You're always saying such ridiculous things. Don't you realize that would take 8 months' worth of salary to do this? And the fact that they say it would cost this much, that actually may be suggesting that they have that much money, which may clue us into just how much money Judas had access to. Should we go spend it? All right, there is an ironic undertone here. Jesus, should we really spend money on something frivolous like this, taking care of your people? Aren't there more wise ways we should use this? We should spend this money on perpetuating the ministry of the kingdom of God, not wasting it on desolate people. And Jesus is about to do something to really put them in their place. You know how I just provided for you? How I just took care of you? Why is it not okay for me to do that for them? Well, it was fun when it was just us. It was fun when you were taking care of me. I don't want anything to have to change. I don't want to have to share. The way we try to make church more about us and the things that we care about than the lost betrays that we don't know who Jesus is. In verse 38, how many loaves do you have, he asked. Go and see. When they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Okay, why do they number the fish? Is that what he asked for? Well, no, but it equals 7 if they count the fish. And I think the disciples are already seeing something here, because in Jewish culture, you don't count numbers, you weigh them. And what I mean is, in Jewish culture, the actual numeric value of a number is way less significant than the symbolic weight that it carries. They didn't use numbers like I do. We're obsessed with counting. They liked symbolism. And the number 7 is huge in Jewish literature because it represents completion. Hearkening back to Genesis chapter 1, the point when God arranged all of the cosmos around the number 7. All right, he could have created in 8 days, but he didn't. He did it in 7. So from that point on, it developed the connotation of completion. So how much food do we have, Jesus? Well, the complete number needed for you to provide for your people. It's as if they saw what they had and were like, oh shoot, something's about to go down. All right, so then it says that Jesus directed them to lie down and to eat. Directed is a really strong word. The word used, it's like he grabbed them and physically moved them. He instructed them to lie down in the green grass, was the words, which, if you were a good Jew, would conjure up an image of a psalm that you grew up reciting. Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He refreshes my soul." And after everyone eats, they're left with 12 basketfuls left over. Oh, how convenient, because 12 is also used as completion, but more specifically, always relating to completion tied with the people of God, Israel, the 12 tribes. Do you think that it's an accident that we started with 7 and ended with 12? I don't. And the disciples are seeing this amazed and also incredibly humbled at their previous attitude. In verse 44, the number of men who had eaten was 5,000. Probably a lot more people were present than that, but it is significant that only the men were counted. And I think, again, Mark is trying to make a point here, because I don't believe this to be like, oh, Jews just didn't count women and children thing because they weren't considered significant to society. That actually was true, but I don't think that's what was happening here, because we see many times that Jesus does count women and children and lifts up their status, and we even see it in the book of Acts. The disciples count women and children. Jesus is not about only counting the men. Okay, but there was another reason that men would be counted alone, separately from women and children, and that was for war. Because only the men would be fighting in the war. So now follow me for just a second. The setting here is significant. As is the story that we just left from a couple days prior to that Dan discussed last week. First, our setting, this quiet place where everyone was eating, the word is eremos. It means desert. All right, now every time a revolution has happened in recent Jewish history, of which there were many, they always started in the desert. All right, these people groups would go out of town, gather their forces in the desert, and then launch their attack from that place every single time. Also, just a couple of days ago, Jesus was in the area of the Decapolis. He came across a man possessed by a demon named Legion. Dan discussed this story last Sunday, who 2,000 or so of him went into a large herd of pigs. Now, a pig was the symbol of the Tensis Legion in that region, by the way. And the pigs, they slaughtered themselves. Why was Jesus okay with killing so many pigs? It's not like he had no respect for his own creation, and he was well aware of the economic impact on the people for losing so many goods. But the image of those same pigs were flying on the flags of the Roman legions stationed in that town. Why did the people want him to leave so desperately after that moment? Because it looks like a politically motivated action against Rome. We have political symbols too. We don't really like it when people burn flags or mess with bald eagles, and Jesus just killed like maybe hundreds of them. And now, here he is just a couple of days later in the desert with 5,000 men. A legion is anywhere from 2,000 to 6,000 men. Usually they count it from 4,000 to 6,000 with very few exceptions. All right, so what we have here is Jesus, claiming to usher in a new kingdom, functioning as God, Yahweh the provider himself, in the desert with political and religious overtones, assembling his own legion. This is the type of stuff that is going to get you crucified in Rome. Remember, there's one crime only that results in the punishment of crucifixion in Rome, and that's high treason, insurrection, trying to overthrow Rome. And I'm not just making this up. In this account of the same story in John's gospel, in John chapter 6, that story ends with the people trying to crown Jesus king so they can go ahead and start their revolution, so they can go and overthrow Rome. Because that's how these things always had happened in the past. That's what they were expecting. But Jesus says, no, that's not how I do things. Because Jesus wasn't actually trying to overthrow Rome physically here on earth. We know that now. He was overthrowing the kingdom of Satan off the entire earth. And our insistence, just like the Jews of then, our insistence on caring more about, being more vocal and more passionate about American politics than the advancement of the kingdom of heaven betrays that we don't know who Jesus is. You don't have 5,000 men being counted by accident. Because the legion that Jesus just cast out in chapter 5, the true legion is seen being assembled here. And this legion is not motivated by the violence and the sword like the other would have been. This legion is created out of compassion and complete reliance on the provision of God. And next we see Jesus walking on water. Okay, and how I just said that really is exactly how Mark tells that story. He just jumps right into it and kind of nonchalantly just throws that out there. Oh yeah, Jesus was walking on the water while the disciples were about to die in a storm. No big deal. So they were freaking out. Okay, and then the second half of verse 50 says, immediately he spoke to them and said, "Take courage, it is I." Right? He actually says, "I am," ego eimi, I am the name of God. Don't be afraid. Then he climbed into the boat with them. The wind died down. They were completely amazed, for they had not understood about the loaves. What? That's kind of a weird statement. Oh man, Jesus was walking on water, but like, do you guys remember that bread? Like from a little bit ago? Like, we totally missed it. Like, okay, neat trick with the water thing, Jesus, but like that bread, though. Again, Mark doesn't want us to miss this. That the message of the loaves was not just the number 7, it was about his ability to provide. It wasn't just about cool magic tricks, it was a display of his identity. You guys were afraid on this boat? You were afraid because you forgot who I am. And when you remember who I am, you know who you are. And everything else in your life is going to fall into place, but if you forget who I am, you're just going to be like a boat tossed around in a storm. Verse 53, when they had crossed over, they landed at Gennesaret and anchored there. As soon as they got out of the boat, people recognized Jesus. They ran throughout that whole region and carried the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. And wherever he went, into villages, towns, or countryside, they placed the sick in the marketplaces. They begged him to let them touch even the edge of his cloak. Maybe they heard a story of somebody doing that. And all who touched it were healed. And we've been here before. This is actually where Jesus had just killed all of the pigs just about 2 days ago. And they ran out of town. They ran him out of town. So what changed? All of a sudden the people recognized Jesus, and suddenly they desperately want him to be there. They want him to come and heal them. What happened? Do you remember the demon-possessed man begged to go with Jesus? He didn't want to stay in town. Nobody liked him there. He never fit in because he was too violent. He wanted to leave, but Jesus said, "No, go into town and tell everyone what I have done for you." And now we're seeing the fruit of his ministry. Because this man had a real life-altering experience with Jesus. He fully understood who Jesus was and the purpose that gave him, and we're seeing the impact that it had on the community. And when we have a genuine life change, not a pretend one where we just stop like saying bad words, all right, when we have a genuine life change, it affects the people around us. If you aren't having an impact on the people around you, maybe you have just never come face to face with the real Jesus. Maybe we just aren't 100% clear on who Jesus is, because this man changed the hearts of an entire town. This story is held in direct contrast to all the others. See what can happen when we just know who Jesus is. Because if you know who Jesus is, you know who you are. And if you know who you are, you don't have to be told what to do. Before they said, "Hey, this looks bad and is going to bring the wrath of Rome down upon us. Get out." But now they're saying, hey, I realize Rome may see you as someone they have to deal with, but I don't care about the repercussions. I want you here, because if Jesus really is who he says he is, they know they have nothing to fear. Our identity is inextricably linked to Jesus's, and once we know who Jesus is, we will know who we are. And once we know who we are, we know what it is we have to do. And if it feels like Mark has said the same thing for the 144,000th time, maybe you're starting to catch on to how significant this really is. Jesus is our Messiah, our Savior. He is our provider. We shall not want, our protector. We have nothing to fear, and he is our King. We are a part of his legion, a legion built on compassion on people and reliance on him. It is our purpose to make his name known to the world. And in his writing of chapter 6, I really think Mark is hoping that if he just tells us enough who we are, we will know what it is that we have to do. Will you pray with me? God, thank you for the ability we have to just freely gather in this place and learn about you and talk about you and worship you. And God, I just ask that as we go throughout our week, you keep on the front of our minds who Jesus is and who we are as a result of that. God, that we can act compassionately towards people just like Jesus did. God, that we can bring your kingdom everywhere we go. It's in your name that we pray.